podcast brought to you by Premier Motor Cars. Our reputation rides on you getting the car of your dreams. On the web at premier-motorcars.com.
Barn-find Ferraris are everyone's dream, and many say that to find a real treasure, you have to search the entire globe. But Jim Bonney just had to look around his neighborhood to find his 1962 250 GTE.
Yeah, my name is Jim Bonney from Sacramento, California, and I've been a sports car guy just all my life, and I've always kind of wanted a Ferrari. And about 5 years ago, my son was driving down the street one night in the dark, and he's a car guy. I've trained him very well. He saw some taillights up ahead, and so he followed the lights home and sort of made a mental note of where the guy lived. And so I went back about a week later and knocked on the door and told him I lived in the neighborhood and I see his car riding around every once in a while. And I said, "Can I see it?" And he said, "Well, sure." So we popped open the garage, and here amongst all the junk and stuff hanging from the ceiling and stuff leaning on the car, sitting on the car, was a white, ivory actually, Ferrari 250 GTE. He bought it in 1967 from an Italian sports car garage near the Broadway Tunnel in San Francisco. And I said, "Great." I said, "You ever use it?" And he said, "Well, I drive it 3 or 4 times a year, but it used to be his daily driver." He worked at McClellan Air Force Base in Sacramento. And I said, "Well, you know, I've always wanted one of these. Would you like to sell it?" And he said, "Well, not really, you know, I just like it. I've had it all these years." And I said, "Well," this was about 5 years ago, I said, being real generous, I said, "You know, I'll give you $12,000 for it." And he said, "No, thanks anyway. I think I'll keep it. I really like it." And so I said, "Okay." So I started going back about every 6 months and talking to him and offering him the same amount and not getting anywhere. So finally I said, "Well, how am I going to buy this car?" So I said, I got an idea. I said, "I'm going to play the wife card." So I waited around the corner till he went to work one day and went up there, knocked on the door, and his wife came to the door, and I said hi, explained who I was and that I'd been talking to Larry for years about selling his Ferrari. I've always wanted one. And I gave her my business card again. This time I was more generous. I wrote $15,000 on the card. So I figured she might want some drapes or some new carpet or who knows what. So maybe remodel the kitchen. So I figured she'd give him the card and maybe stick the needle in the side and give it a few turns. And so then I left, but I didn't hear anything for about 6 months. I thought, well, nothing's ever going to happen from that. And it wasn't 3 days later, I got a phone call at my store and said, "Hi, this is Larry. You expressed an interest in my Ferrari." He said, "Oh, Larry." I said, "I'll be right over." So we went over there, looked at the car again, and went out and drove it. He said, "But 15,000 isn't going to cut it." So he pulls out his issue of Cavallino magazine. I said, "Oh, God, here it comes." Opens it up and looks at the price guide, and he says, "See right here, it says it's worth $30,000 to $60,000. Luckily for me, the issue of Cavallino was August 2003, and I bought the car in April of 2006. So he said, "Well, but I know it takes a while to find a buyer, and it's a lot of work and all of that." So he said, "So I'll sell it for $20,000. So my heart sank, and I said, "Oh boy, I don't want to jump all over this." I said, "Well, I want to check it out first." So we made a date to take it downtown to a Ferrari mechanic, and it checked out really, really nice. And so I went back and I said, "We got a deal." So I bought the car for $20,000, and basically I sold my Alfa GTV for $15,000. So I got this car for an Alfa Romeo GTV and $5,000. It's a driver car. There's a few little wearing through with the paint. It was repainted about 25 years ago in lacquer. Not going to restore it. I might do little touch-ups on the paint where it's worn through a little bit. May or may not redo the interior. The engine was rebuilt in about 25 years ago also by Griswold in Berkeley. Drives great. We didn't have to do too much to get it back on the road. We did an oil and filter change. We did have to rebuild the generator. It wasn't charging. Doesn't use any oil. Brakes fine. Just enjoying the car immensely.
We told Jim he'd be famous and infamous all at once, but he didn't seem to mind. He just drove off in the GTE.